Okay, so here's a little background on this one. Originally, this was going to be a co-op between me and the Cyber Okami on this video, but due to issues on Cybe's side that I won't go into, he's unfortunately unable to collaborate with me on this. The reason I bring Cybe up is because I feel I should credit him, because he was the one who found the video, and even if he couldn't join me, he was still able to help me a shit ton on the script. So yeah, thanks Cybe, you f***. Anyway, so with that said, let's get into this edgy list, because I'm sorta kinda shit at writing opening skits. I'm so sorry you have to put up with me.
You never see it coming. You see that my mind is the best for eyes. You're done but the time it hit you, you're not
Okay, big elephant in the room already. First off, your intro is about 70 seconds long, which considering that countdown intros for the longest while have had a 30 to 40 second range limit, that's around twice the normal amount. It's not just the length that's a problem. The way you handled your footage syncing with the music is done poorly. You start off with a clip of a Larvesta hatching, which lasts about 18 seconds, only to continue with 5 different game clips and a production clip. Considering that you only use that many clips in the span of about 40 seconds, it makes the video feel slow and dragged on. And considering that these kind of intros are typically supposed to hype up the audience for the list, that's not a good way to start things.
Undying Namco has made plenty of great games during their gaming career. We've got Pac-Man, Dig Dug, Tekken, and Soul Calibur to name a few. But even they aren't immune to mistakes, as the first game on this list will explain. The Tower of Dragon can best be summed up as the Legend of Zelda version 0.5 beta. The plot basically amounts to Princess Key getting kidnapped by the Tyler Draga in the third game, The Quest of Key. Given the release date of this game, I can let this slide, but even if the story wasn't basic, the controls are just garbage. Controlling Gilgamesh feels sluggish and awkward, and fighting enemies is next to impossible. Your goal at each floor is to get a key to unlock the door to the next floor, but because of the bad controls and the fact that the key spawns in a random area, you'll have to be lucky to get past floor 5 in a game with 60 floors!
I'm sorry, but this doesn't help your argument, as the way you describe your problems with the game are incredibly vague. You say that the controls and enemies are poorly designed, yet you don't go into explanation of why you say they're like that. You could have gone into a bit of detail about how the controls work or give an example of an enemy in the game with bullshit attack patterns, but there really isn't anything. You can't just use adjectives to hold your argument in something like this. You need to have proper reasoning behind why you feel this way about parts of the game you dislike, or otherwise it'll come off as you not taking the time to look over the video you've produced.
The PlayStation 1 is one of my favorite consoles of all time and one of my most nostalgic memories. I had plenty of fun with several games on it.
Okay, this isn't a super reoccurring problem, but please make sure to check that your audio is properly balanced. Your voice at the beginning of this segment is really hard to hear because of how much louder the audio for the clip of the PlayStation startup screen is in comparison. Please make sure next time to avoid an error like this.
Candy Crush is a really popular game on the internet. While I personally wasn't interested in it, even the slightest bit, in the early 10s, developer King struck a deal with Microsoft to install the game into any computers that upgraded to Windows 10, including mine. Taking into consideration how viral the game was, I decided to try it. And honestly, I wasn't seeing it.
Okay, then why the fuck is it on the list? You specifically stated that this was a list about games that you were hyped for but ended up disappointing you. Saying one of the entries didn't even interest you in the slightest completely removes the main idea of what you're supposed to be talking about.
Pokemon Mystery Dungeon has got to be one of my favorite series of all time. I love every game in the series, even games with Infinity, where they all share in common. The stories are deep and even disturbing at some points, the characters are well fleshed out, and the gameplay felt fluid and adventurous. For my enjoyment with these games, I decided to purchase games similar to this. Unfortunately, one of these games will turn out to be the exact opposite of Mystery Dungeon. Fatal Labyrinth, or as I call it, Fatal Dumpster, is outdated on so many levels. First problem? One of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon's biggest selling points is the variety of dungeons that the player and his or her party could explore, having around 50 or so dungeons. How many dungeons does Fatal Dumpster have? 1. Just 1.
Here's the thing though. The only thing that Fatal Labyrinth has in common with the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series is its genre. That's it. And yes, there could be more done with the game's content, but considering that a lot of games during the time put a lot more focus into its gameplay than having a super lengthy story, it's not the best comparison when you're going in expecting to have equal quality to a game series that started 15 years later.
The only dungeon in this game is the dragon's 31 floor tower, where he guards a sacred artifact he abducted, literally called the Holy Goblet.
Honestly, this joke should have been left out completely. Considering the message only lasts for a second, chances are first-time viewers are going to have to go back and pause at the moment in order to read it. And considering it only emphasizes the fact that the name Holy Goblet is generic, it only serves as a distraction.
Hey, Fatal Dumpster isn't the only old geezer around here. I know some people are gonna hate this choice, but I'm putting Smash 1 on the list. Hey, there's a reason this nostalgia line praised Smash 2 instead of its predecessor. Back on topic though, Super Smash Bros. Slow stuff is what I call first game syndrome. What do I mean? Well, this game has several problems that future games, and in some cases remakes, would go on to fix. Need an example? Let me make a comparison for you. As of the final update, Super Smash Bros. 4, the latest game in the series, has a roster of 58 playable characters. The original, on the other hand, only has 12. I know I'm comparing a pebble to a boulder here, but there's still more I need to talk about.
Oh, okay, so what you're saying is, hey, I know this is a bad argument, but please ignore that because we need to move the fuck on. But seriously though, you shouldn't call older games' qualities bad because they had bigger limitations when compared to newer games in its series. You're obviously going to lead yourself to disappointment, and if you go into Smash 64 thinking it's going to have as much quality and diversity as a game like Smash 4. Also, how does a small roster equal as an automatic flaw? By that logic, Team Fortress 2 and Skullgirls are automatically inferior to other games in its genre because of its small roster. It's not always the case, but there's a reason why less is more is a saying.
Besides 80% of the roster, Super Smash Bros. 1 also lacks several items, including the Smash Ball. In other words, you cannot activate final smashes in this game!
I'm sorry, but did you even think this line through? The Smash Ball was an item that was first used in Brawl, a game that released nearly a decade after the release of Smash 64. How is it the game's fault for not having final smashes when the ideal wasn't even made into reality until the third game in the series? You can't just blame a game for not having something that wasn't even an idea at that point. That argument just doesn't work.
I'll admit, I'm cheating here since Flipnote Studio 3D technically isn't a game, but it was still a huge disappointment and I still feel the need to rant about it. The main issue with this game is an omission of one of the original game's key features, that being the game's online mode, Flipnote Antenna. Flipnote Antenna let people share their Flipnotes with other viewers around the world. In Flipnote Studio 3D, there's no such thing. When the game was initially released in Japan, there was a similar feature, but it was taken down because some dirtbags posted inappropriate content on the servers. Honestly, that omission alone is what got this game this high, but even then, there were still a few nitpicks that I didn't appreciate.
How does that affect the game in any way? How is that the game's fault for the online feature being banned? This argument does not make any sense.
I hate this game. I really hate this game. Don't Eyes I've seen is gonna be one of the worst games I have ever had the displeasure of experiencing.
Oh hey, that sounds familiar.
I hate this game. I really hate this game.
This is a thing that I've seen happen more times than there should be with Countdown Maker starting out. Look, even if you don't have the best idea to start off the segment, it's better than taking and rewording parts of someone else's work. There's a big difference between being inspired by someone else's work and copying someone else's.
But aside from the voice acting, another problem I have is the RNG, or random number generator for short. Randomness is frustrating in several games, particularly party games, but this game is easily one of the worst offenders. The request for me is asked who they want to be with, and several other plot-relevant features in the game are decided purely by the game with almost no input from the player. Nothing in this game gives the player control, and considering that's the whole point of a video game, that's just insulting.
How does the luck in this game make it one of the worst offenders exactly? Like yeah, it could be annoying when the Miis you want paired with each other don't end up together due to the game's luck, but even then, that's stretching it to call it one of the worst examples. It doesn't give you a penalty, it doesn't make you restart from an earlier point in the game, and even then, there are ways to influence the Miis to get the outcome you want, such as collecting travel tickets to build relationships as an example. So, if you don't get the outcome you wanted, there's a chance it can be your own fault as to why. The game doesn't have the only influence, you know? Alright, considering that the number 1 segment has problems I've already mentioned before, and he actually has some decent reasoning for disliking the number 1 candidate, I think it's about time I gave my final thoughts. Look, I know you're just starting out, but the next time you make a list like this, there are definitely some things you can improve on. A lot of your arguments for why the games were on here fell flat on their face and felt like you didn't really put any time into thinking it through. The most notable being the number 8 and 5 segments. The number 8 segment because the game shouldn't have been on the list in the first place because you had no high expectation when going into it based off of what you said. And the number 5 segment because you blamed the game for not having certain parts to it even though there were unavoidable limitations at the time, and hell, some parts didn't even fucking exist at the time. On top of that, there were also times where I felt the editing of your video could have been handled better. Whether it was your audio balancing, the timing of your jokes, there were numerous times where I felt you could have looked over the video and changed it, but instead rushed through it. However, this isn't to say that you can't improve. Honestly, I feel the main problems this video has is because you didn't take the time to look it over. Next time when you make a negative list like this, or any fucking video in general, make sure to double check how well your arguments and humor stand, and who knows, if you learn from this, I could easily see you improving. Welp, my job here is done. Time to be a major piece of shit like always. See ya. Also, Saibi, I know you're watching this, and no, I'm not gonna make a fur affinity, Saibi. I'm not that type of person. If you respect my personal space, I'll respect yours.